Welcome to another episode of the Faith Roundtable, where we check out what's happening and we try to do a deep dive into what's going on in Christianity and all sorts of different trends. So we talk to authors and experts, thought leaders and theologians, professors, all sorts of people to try to understand what's happening in the church in America today. And so, of course, I'm Josh Burtram. I'm your host for the Faithful Politics podcast as well, the Faithful host. It all happens here on the same channel. So you guys can like, subscribe, do all that stuff that hacks the algorithm, and we'd really appreciate that. And so I would love to kind of hear from you. What inspired you guys to write a book about depression and about kind of that, those low seasons in life?
Sure. I'll throw a little piece out there, and then Scott will pick it up. But specifically with these books, Scott and I have done, this is our third book together, really beginning with the first prayer book. I don't think we've ever really sat down and said, hey, let's make a book about. Usually the way it works for a lot of my process, I know for a lot of Scott's process, and definitely with these projects, and very specifically within the low, is we're collecting as we go along.
I mean, it's like, man, I've been through some pretty dark times myself, and not understanding it, and then having this idea that you can treat this as a friend in some strange way, as a companion. I'm talking about this, meaning depression.
Yes.
I actually was actually diagnosed with major depressive disorder, something along those lines, right? There's different ways that they put it, but it went through this whole process of screens and tests and ADHD and this kind of depression. And I know those things go together a lot, and then that sense of anxiety, and it all comes together. Well, hey there, guys. Welcome to another episode of the Faith Roundtable, where we check out what's happening and we try to do a deep dive into what's going on in Christianity and all sorts of different trends. So we talk to authors and experts, thought leaders and theologians, professors, all sorts of people to try to understand what's happening in the church in America today. And so, of course, I'm Josh Burtram. I'm your host for the Faithful Politics podcast as well, the Faithful host. It all happens here on the same channel. So you guys can like, subscribe, do all that stuff that hacks the algorithm, and we'd really appreciate that. But today I have the honor of being able to have on the show today Justin McRoberts and Scott Erickson. So Justin McRoberts is an author, coach, speaker, and songwriter for over 20 years. He's helped artists, ministers, and entrepreneurs find their way to solve problems in their creative processes. When he's not writing, speaking, or coaching, you can find him as the host of At Sea Podcast. He lives in the East San Francisco Bay Area. Learn more at justinmcroberts.com. Justin, thanks for coming to the show.
Happy to be here, man. Thanks for having us on.
Absolutely. And Scott Erickson is an artist, author, performance speaker, and creative curate. His work has appeared on CNN, National Geographic, and various magazines, newspaper outlets, and book covers. He lives with his wife, Holly, and their 3 children in Vancouver, Washington. And you can learn more about him at scottericksonart.com. Guys, thank you for coming on to talk about your latest book that you've written together from Baker Books, In the Low, Honest Prayers for Dark Seasons. Guys, thanks so much for coming to the show.
Again, glad to be here.
Yeah, really appreciate it. So I want to kind of just dig right into the show, into the book. And so I would love to kind of hear from you. What inspired you guys to write a book about depression and about kind of that, those low seasons in life?
Sure. I'll throw a little piece out there, and then Scott will pick it up. But specifically with these books, Scott and I have done, this is our third book together, really beginning with the first prayer book. I don't think we've ever really sat down and said, hey, let's make a book about. Usually the way it works for a lot of my process, I know for a lot of Scott's process, and definitely with these projects, and very specifically within the low, is we're collecting as we go along. So in other words, like the word prayers, the images and the reflections are things that are actually,
Hmm.
I'm collecting these things as I go along. This is something that's helpful for me. It's something that I'm writing down because I'm in it. And then at some point I look up and realize like there's a body of work here that's come out of my own actual personal process that I could then turn into something that is sellable, that is an actual artifact. And so with this specific process, I mean, there are pieces here in this book that really could have been prematurely part of the first prayer book in like 2015, 2016, because this is just stuff that Scott and I have been talking about and writing about forever because we live in and out of
Sure.
seasons of depression. And so we chatted, gosh, I don't know, like 2 years ago and said, I think the thing's starting to come together. Does that resonate, Scott?
Yeah, just like the Gospels, I remember it a little different. No, I think I mean,
I hear that.
we were on, we were talking, and Justin has, this is my fifth book. This is Justin's eighth book. We were talking about what things we were working on, and I was like, well, I actually have a collection of like image and word poetry prayers for depression that I've just been that I have make in my own depressive episodes. And he's like, I have exactly the same thing. And then we were like,
Wow.
our powers combined, it could be something. And so we really talked about like, what would it be? I gave him material that I had been reading about, where does depression come from? What are the causes of it? He gave me some stuff to read too. And then we were like, okay, so we're not scientists or therapists or researchers. We're artists and leaders and speakers. So how would we create an artifact that's rooted in research and good science and good therapy, good spirituality,
Right.
but then became an artistic, like a palatable image and word book that helps you with that? Because I think what we saw a lack of was like bad religion, bad therapy is let's just get you out of this versus you're going through something for a reason. And this depression is
Hmm.
a large signpost in your body. It's your psyche and your
Hmm.
soul going, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm done being this character. I'm done living this rhythm, and I'm shutting everything down to get your attention. And the surprise of those, my first real depressive episode was from vocational burnout. And,
Yeah.
when it lifted a year later, it just like woke up one day, it was gone. I remember going, whoa, where did I get all this treasure? Meaning that time had not been void of a kind of a spiritual formation, that it
Yes.
grounded me in better rhythms. I would never say that God gave me my lowest times, but I will say that it took darkness to see the light. It took sorrow to really find joy. And there have been times where it has taken disbelief to find belief. And so we both connected on
Yeah.
the idea that this idea of this low, this descent into, it's all metaphorical, the belly of the whale, the underworld, the place of dissolve where your illusions are dissolved, that this is actually a necessary spiritual process.
Mm-hmm.
It's in a lot of our biblical stories, the lion's den, Saul falling off the horse, like Jesus dying, and we say it in the creed, going to hell. So there is this process or rhythm in a human life of a descent where a transformation happens, and then an ascent, and coming back to your life again going, I'm changed. What am I going to do differently? And so we were like, could we make a spiritual companion to have the reader, to be alongside the reader who's going through this, so they don't bypass what the divine is doing in that. I think the surprise of life is like looking back and going, this is what has occurred to me. Conversations at restaurants and bars and church services with people is often like the thing that you would have never chosen to have happen to you. The surprise is that later on, people go, but I wouldn't change that happened to me, because it forced me to address things that then led me to a different way of living. And that's
Yes.
how we see the low is a function in our lives. That can have a lot of definitions of what that low is.
Yeah. I mean, I totally resonate actually with, I think, just about everything
I know you do,
said.
Josh. I know
I
you
mean,
do.
it's like, man, I've been through some pretty like dark times myself.
Yeah.
And, like not understanding it and then like having this idea that you can like treat this as a friend in some strange way as a companion. I'm talking about this, meaning depression.
Yes.
I actually was actually diagnosed with major depressive like disorder, something along those lines, right? There's different ways that they put it, but it went through like this whole, process of screens and tests and, ADHD and this kind of depression. And I know those things go together a lot. And then that sense of anxiety and like it all comes together. And it's like,
Yes.
how do we see it not as just merely this pathological experience, but something as like, this is distinctly and uniquely human that and it's even almost in some way part of being made in the image of God in the fall in a world that's broken, just having this element of growth that requires this very difficult process. I don't know what you guys think, but I'd love to hear your reflections.
One would hope, and that's part of why we made the book, and that's part of why it's a prayer book, is one would hope that to think spiritually about depression is to consider depression an aspect of one's wholeness, right? So as opposed to that, so there's a story in the first prayer book about a young man who goes to a priest, tells him that he's having these issues in his relationship with God, and he says, something's wrong with my relationship with God. And the priest says, what's going on? He says, I lay down at the end of the day every day and I do the exam and I look back over my day. And it used to be that I would feel comfort. I used to feel God's presence and a sense of peace. And now, like every night, I lay down and I just don't feel good. Something's wrong. Like it's like, and the priest asks him, describe the feeling. He's like, it's like a pressure. It's like a pressure, like a burning. He goes, the scripture where the disciples feel the burning in their hearts. And the priest says, yes. He goes, it's like that, but it's negative. It's not a good feeling. And the priest gets out of his chair, and the young man thinks the priest is going to bless him. And so he slides out of his chair. The young man gets on his knees and puts his hands like this to receive a blessing. And the priest reaches into his satchel and hands him an antacid. He says, son, you have heartburn. And what we do with the story in the book is like, that's actually, if we think rightly about spirituality and spiritual matters, that is a spiritual moment. Because to think spiritually is to not like, I have my financial life, my social life, my this life, and then over here, my spiritual life. To think spiritually is to think of the entirety of my life, including the parts I don't like and don't see, as being held together by some sort of divine thread. And if that's the case, then one of the invitations of the low is to say, this is an aspect of who you are as well. Learn to live here. So what we're doing with the book is to say, listen, insofar as these depressive episodes or this propensity you might have, because I'm someone who lives with ADHD, and my ADHD leads into these really dark spaces all the time. And if that's true of me, then the question, I hope, spiritually shouldn't be, how do I fix this so I can be whole? But how do I actually embrace this and live this so that I can be whole? How do I live here in a posture in which I receive the wholeness of me in a divine way? And that's a prayer practice, and that's part of why we put the book together. These are the ways that he and I have been learning to live here. How do we help other people do the same?
That makes a lot of sense. Scott, I'd love to hear your reflections.
I mean, I made this book with Justin and I was writing notes during that section. I mean, I think, there's one of my favorite prayers that I wrote was just like, we're the first species on the planet that can contemplate the scope and terror of existence. And, camels don't, manatees, maybe they do. So
zebras don't get ulcers.
Yeah, it's probably okay. It probably isn't really understandable that we might have an off day every now and then. Just the fact that it only takes like 100 nuclear weapons to destroy all life on the planet, and there's 15,000 of them. And they're not, I just watched this thing with this person who's like, we're not really worried about madmen launching them. It's more about like just a basic dumb miscaring of them that
100%.
Could lead to an accident.
Yes.
And so then if that doesn't make you want to lay down in your bed and go, man, I just think there's something wrong with you. So that's like, I was on a conversation today with somebody. This woman contacted me who I know, and she was like, I was talking to this guy who's in his 40s and he just has really struggled with wanting to be alive. And he's felt that way since 25. And I was like, that's really normal. At least that's what my therapist told me. I'm the same way. And she's like, what? And I was like, yeah, it's completely normal to just periodically go, I don't know if I want to do this. And
Yep.
Yep.
because there's lots of reasons for that. There's lots of terrors and lots of, I worked with 2 therapists this summer to really get through some stuff. And, I think I've never said this publicly, there's a part that I really encountered, which was this childhood part of me that's really frustrated with this is what the world is. And then even allowing that child part of me to come into my adulthood
Yes.
has been interesting and scary and kind of, buck up, don't be so vulnerable, don't be such a wuss, whatever. But it's like,
Totally.
I think that's in all
Yeah,
of
man.
us, which is just like, is this what we're making? Is this how we have to respond to everything? Is this
Yes.
how things need to be set up? I mean, it makes a lot of sense when Jesus is, I've been coming back to so many Jesus statements, just like, what good
Yes.
is it if you gain the world and give up your soul? And I feel like I live in a system that is like, and I think it's been really disheartening for me to be like, eh, and I'm curious, Josh, what you would say to this, because I too have been like, whoa, 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 are we just giving up our soul for gaining the whole world? Is that,
Hmm.
and you're doing that and you're calling it Christianity? I don't understand what we're doing anymore. And so that was a long way to answer. Like,
That's a
yeah,
good answer.
depression is a normal response to the chaos
Yes.
and to the craziness that we're experiencing.
One of the books that informed
Yes.
us, and one of the books that Scott fed me early on in our process, was Johann Hari's book, Lost Connections. And what Hari does with the book is he reframes depression as, at least in part, more a matter of connection. In other words, like the opposite of being depressed isn't being happy. The opposite of being depressed is being connected. That a
Mm.
lot of what we experience when we talk about depression has to do with these connections, and these connections, these places in which like our lives are severed from life-giving sources, like a hopeful future and deep meaningful community. And what we notice as we pay attention to these things is there are a lot of elements, a lot of agencies in the world that really are working to segment us from things that are good for us. In other words, the world and the systems around us tend to work to separate us from beloved community, to tend to like strip from us any sense of hope in the future. And so it makes a world full of sense that a really normal reaction to systems and ideologies and agencies that are actually after you, that don't want you to be healthy, that you would feel unhealthy, that you would feel sad. If you don't feel disoriented in the world this jacked, then maybe that's the real issue. Like if you feel normalized the fact that there are thousands and thousands of nuclear weapons that at any point could eradicate the entire, like that's the world you live in, like why aren't you worried? So it make that stuff makes sense. And so this book is a way for us to say, if you feel dizzy and disoriented, if you feel separated from the world in which you live, that's not just a normal response. That's a really good and appropriate response to the world in which you live. How do you learn to be whole and don't push that thing out, but follow the thread? If you feel disconnected, where's that coming from? Let's help you get there.
Yeah, yeah. I really appreciate everything you guys have just said, actually. Like, I feel definitely resonate with your words. I have pictures and ideas that come to my mind of past experiences as you're talking, right? That are just kind of flooding in front of me, right, in my brain. And, trying to work through like being depressed, looking at this world and how bad it is. And yet at the same time, seeing the good and trying to hold on to the good and trying to be there for my kids and trying to be there for my wife and trying to be there as a pastor, and trying to be there and help people see, like, I've had a call to the radical middle. I think we've lived in this call to the radical right, the radical left for so long.
Yes.
I need a call to the radical middle, and I know I'm going to get mocked. And I know people are going to get angry and say, how could you imagine? And if it's already happened and it will happen, but it's like, I don't know. It's like you think about Paul, like what was the strategy of the cross, the cruciform life? What was it? It was expose the degradation, expose the corruption, expose the just moral bankruptcy of the empire mentality and the empire, which was ruling in both the Jewish elite and it was ruling in the Roman elite, certainly, and it had ruled essentially in every kingdom and empire that has ever existed. And so what did Jesus do? He intentionally chose to reject the power structures of the world. And he displayed the corruption of those power structures through the cross. And I think that's why Paul can say Jesus essentially triumphed over the evil in the world on the cross. How?
Yes.
Well, he exposed it for what it was, corruption, and anyone who has eyes to see can see it. And I think that that's the hope, but we also have to deal with the corruption that leads to the depression that can make you feel like, Elijah coming off Mount Carmel in the wilderness and Jezebel is after you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just like, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and that conquering, his overcoming comes through by way of suffering. In other words, like the cats around him who wanted answers and wanted responses to the corrupt power sources. What they wanted is they wanted another ruling power. They wanted another conquering king. And Christ's pathway was the way of suffering. So real life example, real time like stuff going down that coincides with your other podcast. There are 4 dead people in Michigan because there was a shooting at a church yesterday. And like there was a shooting and a fire at a church yesterday. There are 4 dead people.
An LDS church.
Right? So
absolutely at a church. Yep.
What the corrupt power sources, politically and otherwise, want to do with that moment is like, now that this thing has happened, you need to come up with an understanding of like on this side. It's about guns. It's about this. It's about mental health, and we want to get into like a 40,000-foot conversation that is about like dividing people up, and we're gonna pick a side, and like we're gonna fight about this thing, as opposed to like the one place where we actually potentially have a sense of like connection and unity is that what if it was just awful? What if it's just enough to grieve and to actually just be sad and overwhelmed? What if that's the pathway? And what if we spend so much time? What if the power structures around us want to get us to pick a political side of this so that we remain unhuman and so that we remain
Of course they do.
We remain attached to their agendas as opposed to becoming human and just being sad and overwhelmed. It is the invitation of the low to just be overwhelmed and let that be enough.
It's the invitation in my mind. I know this is going to sound crazy. Maybe. Let me know. Reality test me right now. But I feel like we got to get out of the matrix. We're in the matrix and it says you got to go here, you got to go there. You can't exist anywhere else but these 2 extremes. Yeah. And we have to say, no, I refuse to accept that that's the category that, that I have to be in one of those things. I refuse to do that. Like you can call me whatever, and I know that that's going to happen. But as long as I have any power and any influence, I'll use it to call people to something higher than just worldly gain. That's what Jesus did for his disciples, and that's what the early church did for its adherents, and it grew like wildfire because of that, not because of loud evangelistic rallies. They are essentially non-existent. It was an illegal religion in the Roman Empire. And so after essentially 63 AD, they couldn't have these kinds of like things like Billy Graham or things we see, right? That was impossible in that context. And so what did they do? They loved people. It's funny, like one of the things that is interesting, I think, about the book is that it's intentionally non-prescriptive. It's not, hey, here's how you fix it. Here's the next step. Here's like, it's more than a companion than a cure, right? And when you go in the self-help books, right, it's like, oh, this is a cure. Hey, do this 10 steps to what? A better life. 17 steps to becoming a millionaire. Here's the cure. But what is
Don't forget losing weight and having better sex.
Oh,
those
absolutely.
are the other big sellers too.
Clearly.
That's our next. If we're gonna try to get all of those in the next book,
let's do it.
Also, I really want someone to pitch a book with 17 steps. I want to see.
Let's do it. How about 16 and a half?
The most like random ass number. 17.
How about 16 and a half?
I love this idea. It's the next move. It's the next move in self-help is the 17-step program.
Yes, please. Forget the 12, dude. Come on, let's be real.
We need 5 more. We need 5 more.
There's a reason it's not prescriptive because the content is in the reader, not in the book. So what we mean by that, and this is in our first prayer book, is, and it was funny because like we had to really explain it to the publisher because they didn't get it. And we're like,
I can imagine the conversation.
and this is, and I tell. And we talk to people still about like, look, in our book, Words and Images, I would say music, poetry. What is great about art is that it is I like to call it an excavation tool. Now it pulls something deep inside. You can even do this with scripture, because I'll say, like, have you ever had this experience where you read a passage of scripture and you underline a certain part, and then, a while later you come back to that scripture and you're like, yeah, this part's good, but I would underline this part now. What are you saying? Did the words change? No, the conversation in
Right,
you
right.
changed. And those words are excavating a deeper thing. It's like when somebody prays something and then some people at some parts go, and then other people at other parts go, what is that resonance? They're saying, like, what you're saying resonates with something in me. So what we're saying is the content is in you. There's something going on in you that noise, busyness, ego is kind of covering or has a hard casing around. And so these words, images, music, I like music. I have this experience where I'll turn on the radio and then all of a sudden a song will come on and you're like, oh, this is my song. What are you saying? You're saying somehow lyrically and sonically, this this artist is getting into gave a vehicle like approaching God, sonically gave me something that says, this is how I feel right now. And then all of a sudden that becomes like a vehicle to approach God with. And so we knew that was our first intention. Sorry, our intention with our first book. And then we've carried that in. So this one, we're like, hey, I don't know what's going on in you. I can write from my own perspective because I think we'll find a lot of common ground in that. But what are helpful word and image tools that can kind of excavate what is going on in you? I can't prescribe what you need, but I can give you a helpful set of like tools. And that's what this is. So, I mean, this morning I was really struggling with some really low feelings and I reached for my own book. And I went to a couple ones and I used it. It's funny. And I was like, I didn't,
That's cool.
I hope other people, I made this for me. It was only until Justin and I think there's a book there, but I was making this stuff for myself.
Absolutely.
As my own need, as my own spiritual care. And gathering other things. And so then we were like, well, let's use our ability to, as artists and as writers and as illustrators, to make something. But it's like, this is just a book of excavation tools to get to what's going on in you. And so I think they become timeless then, because they're rooted in good therapy and good research, but then it's like, I don't know what's going on with you a year from now, 5 years from now, but I'm sure there's a tool in this book that could excavate that. And that's what it is.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I appreciate the clarity there, because like some people might come in to this looking for the cure in the answer, and I need the answer. And it's like, that's not what we're promising, but we are promising companionship along the journey and to help you, give you some tools to kind of figure out what's going on. Because if you tackle this like it's a cure, it's not very long until you're going to have the disease again, and you're going to have to go through the cure again. And you're going to have to just step it up to something else, or something else it's going to be attributed to, but you're not actually doing the work to dig to figure out what's going on within you, because it's very scary to do.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's frightening, at least to me. I guess I can't speak for everybody else. I've heard other people say that.
That cycle is one of the things, providing tools for people, which Scott and I've done with this. This is the third prayer book, like providing tools for people that invite them to their own process between themselves and the divine, is counter to. It's part of why we end up having to explain it to publishers. We're putting something on the table because we're trusting the reader, and we're trusting the work of God in and around the reader, as opposed to trying to be prescriptive and give them something to do. Or give them a way to feel or a thing to think specifically. It's so counter to the way whether it's self-help cultures or political culture actually works, because you can almost know for sure you're being manipulated if here's the information and here's how to think about it. Here's the information and here's how to feel about it. Here's the news and here's the way you ought to respond. Insofar as like there's almost always like the tail end of this there's like a little edge of like, this is what you're supposed to think about. Here's who you're supposed to blame. Like all those prescriptive things are almost always a matter of manipulation, trying to get you to think the way we think so that you are like connected to our machine. The other piece of it, when it comes to, you said a second ago, it works for a minute and then it stops working. You have to level up. Like I think we got to come to grips, like real life, with the fact that like that's the way those things are designed. Like planned obsolescence is like primal, like
right.
capitalistic, like nothing wrong with capitalism on the whole, but like that is the way the machine works. I'm going to make something that feeds you for a minute and then you're going to get sick again. And when you get sick again, you come back to me. Like that's the way diet culture works. It only works for a while, and then you're going to pick the weight back up, and you're going to have to come back and get more of it. It's the conversation between Jesus and the woman at the well, and he says, like, "Listen, you have to keep coming back to this thing over and over and over again. I want to provide you something that actually wells up from within you, so that you never have to come back to these wells again." So when Scott talks about excavation tools, part of what we're getting at is like, listen, if we really do trust this God we talk about to be as good as we say he is, then we need to start, no joke, we have to start mistrusting the machinery, the religious, political, social machinery around us that is very clearly angling itself to make us addicted to it, and ignore the ongoing work between our souls and the one who created all things and holds all things together. So part of that non-prescriptive piece, like we really do have to explain it to publishers and other folks all the time. We don't want to add one more noise to a whole bunch of other stuff. We want to say it's already happening in you. Like you don't need the book. You don't need the book. What you need is you need to have a connection already with what's actually going on. It's like, if the book is helpful, then fantastic, and we would have done our job. But you don't need the damn book. You need what's going on inside you.
Right. Anything you'd add to that, Scott? Any thoughts that came as he was speaking? I saw you flicking there, so I didn't know if that was like your if you had a dog that you're like, get out of here, because that's what I might do to my dog.
No, I was given like the poetry recital snaps, like the the non-interruptive affirmation.
Nice.
Yeah,
nice,
I think
nice. That makes sense.
It was on the part about like the machinery, trusting God. I think what's really disheartening to me, and we're seeing a larger fruit of this, is I'm so curious why so many people are willing to just give themselves over to abusers and not demand accountability. That's really what, for me, I'm just like, I don't understand why you want anybody to be over you and not have accountability. As somebody who has been in leadership, it's like, from law enforcement to religious leadership, it's like, as Justin and I are both trained spiritual directors, so we meet with vocational ministers, and I love vocational ministers, and I love police officers. But in no way, if I found that a vocational minister was abusing a child, would I be like, oh, sorry, we just have to keep protecting you. I'd be like, no, that's not healthy for them, for the abused, and for the community. Yes. And the same with law enforcement. God bless the women and men who have stepped into a very difficult role. But
absolutely,
that doesn't mean they're beyond accountability. I just like this, this lack of wanting accountability is really, but I do think it's like, this is a big step from what Justin was saying. I was like, the machine wants you to stick with the machine. God is going, hey, I am in you, so connect with me there. Also, I am in everybody that you meet too. Like I am, everybody has the dignity of God in them. So there is a missing part to understanding me if you neglect looking for me in the other person. I mean, I think to be a Christian is to look for Christ in everybody, because I can't go anywhere. I can't go to a mountain. He's just up there like, here I am. Here's where Christ is. I mean, Jesus intentionally has said, you want to do something for me? Yeah, it's when you fed the hungry, I was hungry. It's when you gave water to the thirsty, I was thirsty. In the teachings that we have, it's laid out specifically like, you're going to love me and follow me by caring for the people around you. So there's just, I do think it is somewhat of a byproduct of, I grew up in church my whole life. And I love the church, but I also have worked for destructive leaders and destructive systems. And in no way I'm like, let's keep this going because, man, we got a lot of real estate. I don't want to lose that.
Yep.
Right.
So with, as there's a pile of bodies behind the bus going forward. So I do think like this practice of what he's getting to is like, I think a lot of people might I think the people who might not know what to do with this book are the people who have a spiritual poverty and understanding or having a life with God that doesn't involve the mediator and doesn't, and then maybe have not said, oh, and then also this is going to make sense in the context of my community and relationship with other people, my neighbor, my other congregates, and then strangers. I mean, the audacity that Jesus really asked us to get to is like, can you love your enemy? That's where he's taking us. And that is, on paper, sounds nice, but in real life, it was really hard.
So hard.
Because
So
have you
hard.
met people?
Yes,
There's a lot of a-holes out there.
Agreed.
I mean, we just prayed this. I just preached at my church yesterday, and we read a prayer, which is just like, if we know that God cares for us now in our complexity and cares for our neighbor in our complexity, could you lead us to the most audacious thing was we'd be able to love the complexity of somebody we call our enemy. That is what we're entering into.
Man.
Yeah, I really love that.
Yeah. That we don't really cover that in this prayer book, but it's in the same.
No, I mean, that's okay. I mean, the conversation,
bookshelf.
yes. And the conversation goes where it needs to go. That's what I found with this stuff is that,
Yeah, totally.
People are going to be more interested in the book because of the conversation, right? Because they're like, I want to know more. I want to hear more. I want to understand how these tools can help us. And I think that is the goal, and that is what we want, because we do want to slow down a little bit, I think, no matter what. I think we need to slow down just a little bit because everyone is telling us we're careening and we just need to. And one thing is, how much can we control? See, it's like if we all were just like, hey, let's just take a step back, calm down, then maybe it would be like, hey, this wouldn't sell. But unfortunately, it does. And, when we're in a dark time, I love one of the themes that you bring out is that God meets us in darkness, even the language of Psalm 139, that darkness is as light to you. And I would love for you to kind of just dig into that, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Why that's so significant that darkness is as light to God.
The necessary relinquishing of our controls. This is the moment. This is the, I think, not just personally, but culturally, this is the moment we're in, is the necessary relinquishing of our control. So when we talk about light and dark, light means I can see everything theoretically. I can see everything. I know where things are rightly placed. I can locate myself. I know where I am in my story. I know where I am in my culture. I know where I am, etc. There's a narrative. I can see things. In the dark, I can't tell how close I am to danger, so everything feels a little nervous. I don't know where I am in the room. I don't know who's in there with me. It's a fundamentally disorienting place. If we spend too much time in the light and constantly feel like we can see everything, then we become dependent either on like whatever the source of light is, which 9 times out of 10, if we're honest with ourselves, is like not a divine source of light. It's CNN, it's Fox News, it's someone's religious system, it's the church pastor, it's someone's political agenda that gives us a sense of orientation. These are the sources of light. So in our immaturity, we have sources of light that keep it light all the time. It's light all the time. You should always know you are. So when you start to feel that disorientation, those systems will say there's something wrong with you. But if we understand just the basic formation of the world, it's light for a while, and then it gets dark for a while, and the darkness has a purpose. We are culturally in a moment, and
right.
I mean, you know this probably better than most folks because of the way your podcast bend. The pervasiveness of disorientation right now. I mean, it's an unprecedented moment. It's a book actually Scott and I are reading by a guy named Francis Weller, called "In the Absence of the Ordinary," and he writes, and this is like I'm going to sell you 2 books today. One is ours, and the other one is this one. Weller writes in the introduction to his book. He says, "We have clearly," and I totally agree, "we have clearly entered the long dark." Collectively, it may be decades or more likely a few generations before we see the farther shore of this crisis, if we make it. This is I love this line. "This is essential territory, both inevitable and required, offering a form of soul gestation that may gradually give shape to our deeper lives, personally and communally." When we enter the dark, it's not because when we actually enter the dark personally and specifically on the cultural level, it's not because things have gone wrong and we need to make them right again. It's because we should be questioning the sources of light that have been providing our orientation. That's what the moment is for. The moment is for like, hey, if you feel politically lost, Maybe you should, because the machines around you haven't actually been serving you. And if you feel disoriented, if you can't find yourself in your political party, maybe that's the right response to the moment you're in. If you can't find a church home that gives you a sense of actual deep place, maybe it's time to question how we have been doing church for the last 75 to 125 years. Maybe you're right in feeling the way you feel. And it's not that there's something wrong with you that we need to fix. Maybe you're actually in a place of wisdom and clarity and discernment. And what we want to do in the low book is say, hey, stay here. Don't get out. Stay here. Follow the threads of that disorientation to their deeper roots in you and in your culture. And then just wait it out and wait until God does a thing that actually makes sense, as opposed to fix it and switch the damn light back on, because the source of light that's providing your orientation has not been serving you. It's not been giving you an orientation in a real story. It's giving you an orientation in its story. So that is the invitation of darkness, and it's why it's necessary, because it causes us to question fake sources of light.
Can I respond to, well, okay, but I feel like there's a lot of people who, and Josh speak to this too. I mean, I feel from what I've heard, there's people going, I mean, I've heard from other ministers where people are like, actually, Jesus's teachings are kind of weak. And I just, I'll do it in Jesus's name, but loving your enemy, turning the other cheek is real weak. And we actually need to be strong and we need to like dominate. So I see what you're saying, Justin, but I don't know if people are aware, if they're like, well, I've seen so much soul selling for power that the light for them is power, not humility.
That's good.
And then getting, I just like heard this guy, it was like these two people discussing either sides, and it was good. But this guy was like, I have the right to defend myself. And if these people want to, well, he was just like, sorry, I can't think of the word. Just like teach my children stuff. I have the right to defend myself. And I was like, let's play that fantasy out. You want to shoot teachers who taught your kids evolution because you're mad that maybe Noah's Ark isn't a literal story. And then I was like, play that out. So then watch their bodies. Would you watch the person you shot die when their kids come over and like, why'd you kill our dad? And you're like, well, it's my right. I'm the hero. And then at night, would you be the hero? Would you have nightmares? Would you have to take up drinking to kind of deal with that? It's like this whole weird, nobody's taking their fantasies all the way. Versus, I don't know, maybe listen more, maybe, I don't know. I just think that I think you're saying there's this light. I love the idea. I think the light for people is their algorithm, not the light. They would rather trade the light of the algorithm than the light of Jesus, who says, love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah.
That's good.
And
man.
that's the false light. And
yeah,
so
that's good.
Yes.
If I'm, and then always, and there is the pressure of being always right on the internet. And I am failing miserably at that. Like, so here's it vulnerably, I am really trying to navigate. I think what's challenging for me is that Christ and Antichrist are actually so close. They're not, I think I used to think that they were like, there's Christ and then there's Antichrist, and they're so far apart. But actually, I'm like, they're so close because, and maybe you could say, well, it's people who are for Christianity and then people who are Jesus. And I've had this experience, like we all have, it's like, I'm watching senators in the name of Jesus vote to take away medical coverage for Americans. And they pray together. And then I'm watching other senators in the name of Jesus saying, this is so wrong. And I'm like, well, if I'm involved a lot in doing my kids' homework math with them. So if we're doing, the common denominator that you just take out is Jesus, which means it doesn't matter what you call it. It doesn't matter that you say Jesus anymore. It's just really what you want to do. Like, I know why I have my faith practice because, and here's my definition of sin, which is I understand that there's a power within me that is always longing to use everything and everyone for my own benefit, even if it means taking away the dignity of that creation. And so I have the practices of repentance and forgiveness and reconciliation to curb that thing in me. And I just know it's in me and it's in everybody else too. I can't make other people do that. I just know that that's how I want to be in the world because I see how Jesus was in the world. And this is where, and then so I can, when we get to left to right, conservative, liberal, whatever, these names, I'm just like, I don't know. I think it just comes down to like, do you think there's innate value in another person? If you have to do something that says that that's not, then it just seems like that's I don't know, that's the line of Christ and Antichrist for me. But
That's good, man.
that's just me figuring that
Yeah, I
out
mean, I
for
think that's a
myself right now.
very interesting and powerful analysis. Like I've been in this habit of trying to repeat back to people what I heard them say,
Well,
and
that's
to make sure that I'm truly understanding it. Because, one of the things in argumentation theory, I'm like one of the weirdos that likes things like argumentation theory. And it's like this idea that if you aren't actually putting like the other person's whatever they said in your words, but in a way that they would say, yes, that's what I mean, then you haven't actually understood them. And
good.
if you haven't understood them, then you're not actually arguing. You're just kind of talking about different things. Because argumentation is it's actually a pursuit. It's actually a combined pursuit to truth.
Yes.
So that's the idea, right? It's almost like the idea of like that book, Crucial Conversations, which I thought was a great book. And it essentially was like, hey, like you need to create a place where there's safety and respect. And if you take away those out of the environment, then there is not going to be constructive conversation because it's literally impossible in that environment because nobody feels safe or respected. So they're only going to be operating out of their amygdala, not out of their prefrontal cortex. And they're not going to actually be able to interact with people in a helpful and healthy way. And so I think that like it's super important that we normalize the kinds of things we're doing on the show, that we normalize the kinds of things that you're talking about, the human experience, right? And I do think that there is going to be an increased, my prediction, I'd love to get your thoughts on this, there is going to be an increased disrespect and almost like I don't know if that's the right word, but almost like a dismissive attitude toward depression, anxiety, mental health issues, like almost like you said, like that's weak.
Oh yeah.
And that's going to be like really like exploited, like, and that I'm not necessarily looking forward to. I mean, it's already happening, I think.
Yes.
And I'm not looking forward to it continuing.
That I'm not necessarily looking forward to. What a great line.
Someone recently
to put it
I'm
mildly,
really looking forward to that.
No. I think it's gone around a little bit, but the analysis is this is the most I'm going to get this wrong, but something along the lines of this is the most therapized generation in human history, and they're the sickest generation, mentally sickest generation in history. And then the conclusion is, therefore, therapy doesn't work. Like that's one of those like weird little attacks. And I'm like, God, that's such a jacked up way to look at this. Because the other side of the coin is like, what if that many people are actually kind of jacked up because the world around them is actually jacked up?
Totally.
What if that actually, what if it actually is that bad in the same way that like there's disbelief? I just saw this reel the other day. Someone sent it to me, like the gaslighting of people with regards to their own human experience. This questioning of the number of women who've experienced sexual assault, that there's this full blown like pushback on the 1 in 5 or 1 in 4. Like they couldn't, and the argument is that it couldn't possibly be 1 in 5, 1 in 4, because that would put America on par with like Ghana and third world nations. And the notion is like things have to be much better than people are talking with in terms of their mental health or abuse or what have you. Things must be better. It's already happening, which is utterly wild. And it's because from the Christian tradition perspective, how are we not willing to embrace like the actual jacked up, like this is like root Christian theology, that like things outside of the control of a loving God, things are chaos and awful. Like, how is that not the easy thing to believe? But you're 100% right that the pushback on just what I would consider is a bit of a cultural revelation, that there are that many people who are that disoriented, who are actually that sad, who are actually that jacked up inside. It really is that bad. And the pushback is like, that can't possibly be true. There's got to be something wrong with you. It's absolutely just devastatingly wild.
Because our brand is we're great and we're the best ever. And I mean, Sebastian Junger's book, Tribe, is a great little book. It's a 3-hour audiobook. It's really fascinating, but he looks into, he was a reporter put in Afghanistan with a Marine troop. When he came back, he was a reporter When he came back, he had, this is before PTSD was really being talked about. He had symptoms of PTSD. And he's like, why? I didn't see any combat. He looked at the numbers. 10% of everybody who was deployed experienced combat, only 10%. But 50% of people who came home experienced PTSD. He's like, well, those numbers are off. And his conclusion, what he comes to is like, actually what people experienced in a Marine group was they had each other's back. They were working on a mission together. They worked together, even though they came from different backgrounds and different things. And they experienced community. And then when they came home, they experienced a sick society. So he was like, the PTSD wasn't from combat. The PTSD was coming back to a sick society.
100%.
And he starts the book by going, during
wild.
the American Revolution, there are many, many, many instances of, settlers being captured by Indians or like native communities and then embedding themselves in native communities. In fact, many stories of people not wanting to leave. He's like, there's not one story of a Native American wanting to join Western society. Not one. And he's like, why is that? It's this lie of rugged individualism. It's this lie of I can make meaning by myself. What we're seeing even with the Charlie Kirk and all this stuff is just this kind of lie of my mode should be always trying to dominate, always trying to win, and then I'll find meaningful relationships in that. I mean, it's such a lie. And especially with the I don't want to throw a bomb right at the end of this, but like the number of men
but
100% those numbers are true about women. And also what we don't talk enough about is how many men have been sexually abused.
100%.
Because
right.
most of my friends have, and sorry, I don't know if we're supposed to swear on this, but fucking never talk about it. And my therapist,
You're fine.
and I bring it up because that happened to me, they're like, it's so common in men.
So common.
You have just a blanket of BS over everything to keep it all going and not dealing with deep trauma and pain that are in the lives of men who should be leading. We have nothing to learn from women. My gosh.
Crazy.
Sorry.
It's nuts.
It's so crazy.
It's
so crazy.
It's crazy. And so part of our invitation is like, listen, stop coming to conclusions. You have this experience, the cultures around you, the control driven cultures around you, including the hyper male, leadership, fix it. I'm too strong to be weak, all that. All these control methods, they want you to come to a conclusion quickly so we can move on to what's next so we can get back to their agenda. The invitation we're offering is not the invitation we're offering in the book is not to say we have a different interpretation of your experience. That's not what I'm saying. And so coming back to the prescriptive, we're not prescribing. What we're saying is follow the thread. If there is something, absolutely, you are having this experience, follow the thread. What is that? Is part of that what's going on in you? And are there chemical imbalances and things? And should you end up getting medicated? That might be true. But follow the thread to figure it out. Also, follow the thread to find out if the family you grew up in told you a bunch of lies that you're now undoing about who you are, because that might be true. Follow the thread to find out if your career path was never actually something you chose, and that every decision you made since you were 16 years old about what you're supposed to do with your job is because you're trying to make your dad and your mom happy, and now you're freaking 35 and you're miserable sitting on millions of dollars and you're trying to figure out. Follow the thread to figure out what's going on. Because here's what I don't trust. Here's the thing I don't trust. I don't trust that the human soul can be that sick that it completely loses itself in general. What I do trust is that God designed human beings to have a deep sensitivity and a deep orientation to truth, to wholeness, to reality, and to wellness. And that if we are experiencing this level of sickness, then we can follow that thread and trust the handwork of God in the human soul to actually diagnose the cultures around us if we would give ourselves and our souls in community and in patience time to prophetically speak back against all kinds of machines, all kinds of agencies with their own agendas and say, no, we really do feel this way. We really are having this experience. This is not the way it was supposed to be. And I'm going to do what I can do to reorient myself in was what you're talking about. I'm going to do what I can do, everything I can, to reorient myself in relationship to what is true, what is whole, what is good, and where peace lies. That's what I trust. I don't trust that the human soul can be that jacked up and lost. No, I think it is a beacon that points towards wholeness. And part of our collective experience of depression and disorientation is an indictment of the cultures in which we live that want to, propagate narratives of power and dominance and the light on the hill lie. Like, nope, I think we need to undo all this stuff and get back to humanity.
Yes, I really appreciate both of your insights and your ideas, and for writing this book and providing a place to have this conversation and think through. I'd love to just hear, how can people follow you? Do you have a preferred vendor that you guys would want people to do with the book, and how can people kind of follow what you guys are doing? What do you have coming up next?
I think right now, Baker Publishing, who our book is with, they have a really great store and they're offering a really great discount. I know Amazon's kind of dominated the market, but you can really get directly from them. And that's a great spot. For me, I have a series of live events randomly coming up through the next year, but mostly I'm just on Instagram and making stuff there. That's
awesome.
That's where we can connect.
Yeah.
Justin, what's your handle on Instagram? Sorry, just real quick, Scott, what's your...
I'm Scott the Painter. Most people don't even know my real last name, and I'm just known as Scott the Painter.
Scott the Painter. All right, great. Justin, sorry, go ahead.
I'm just Justin McRoberts wherever I go. I don't paint.
I paint.
And yes, you do. That's a great inside
Sorry,
joke.
Inside joke.
Totally
No
terrible.
sweat.
That's bad for the podcast. So yeah, similar, like Scott and I will be doing a few joint events coming up. It's called the Low Show, related to the book. But the best way to find me is to just search my name. And the best place to find the book, I'll be honest with you, I'll give you two sources. One is Byron Borger is my favorite bookseller in the country, and he runs a bookstore called Hearts and Minds. So if you want to get it from a non-Amazon source, that's my favorite source. Baker also has a great store. But honestly, like, whatever works for your life, if you want to head down and knock on the door at the local bookstore and say, can you order this in, that's fantastic and helpful as well. Wherever you want to get it,
that's great.
Your life is great.
Yeah,
I love it. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on the show, spending some time with me, and letting me hear some insight, and our audience. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having us.
Josh.
On.
Thanks for being a great host.
It was a lot of fun. Absolutely. It was a lot of fun. And to our viewers, guys, thanks for joining us. And we will see you next time. Until then, God bless and take care.